Alright, so welcome back to Driveway. Today we are going to have something more along the lines of a state of the project address. So we'll just check out what things needs to be accomplished and everything before we try to hit up Rocky Mountain Race Week. So let's just go through what we need to do to keep ourselves on track. Alright, so I've been toiling away, checking things off the stack. We've got a throttle cable over here now. It's still got its tail over here just in case I need to change its length for some reason. So we got the cable in, we got a pedal rigged up. We've got pretty much all of our sensors hooked in. All that I have to struggle around with is swapping out the stupid oil pressure sensor in the back to one that will actually work with the terminator system, and so on there. Then after that, I'm going to have to mess around with the boost control, and that will pretty much be done with this 4-port Mac valve. So these are kind of interesting because you have your intake and exhaust port, and then you put one to the bottom of the wastegate and one to the top of the wastegate. And depending on your duty cycle, if you're from 0 to, I think it's 50%, everything's modified through here. So it's adding air, removing air. But then if you're above that 50% to 100%, it's adding and subtracting air to the top. So essentially, if you have, I don't know, we might have a 5 psi spring in the wastegate. So as you get closer to that 5, it will start adding air here until it pops the valve. So then you're staying at the 5. But then if we dial in to tell it to go to, let's say, 20 psi, this will essentially vent everything, and then it'll start adding air to the top, pushing the wastegate down until it reaches that 20, and then it'll start venting this off. So the way we are going to do this, it makes it so we don't have to use one of the inputs on the terminator, is like we were playing around with that air compressor in the back. We will have something rigged up there. That's how the CO2 guys do it. So we'll just have a set compressed air on the in, and then the computer will know what PSI that air is, and then it'll adjust here. What that will allow us to do is, unlike when you run it using boost pressure to hold down on the dome, this is a constant value, so your resolutions shouldn't get messed up too much. Because the problem when you have like 15 psi putting in there, you're not going to always have that 15 psi, so your duty cycle is just going to keep constantly changing compared to that. So this hopefully will keep a duty cycle to a certain level, and we'll be set. So that's just going to tie into the system. Should be relatively easy. And here's the oil pressure guy that I've got to shove in there. So that'll be later today. I'll just knock that out because it's going to involve climbing on top of the engine, and it's not a fun experience, I'll just put it that way. Alright, and then let's see, I got the fuel system already hooked up, so we're good there. Our oil is all system set up. We've got coolants all hooked up. So I still got to do some exhaust work, like making the wastegate actually flow into the exhaust, and then we're going to probably just put exhaust right out the passenger side, kind of more NASCAR style, because as I'm running fuel lines over there, I really don't want exhaust to go near the fuel line. So I'm just going to run it straight out and just make a hook. So that's at least the plan there. Once we got the exhaust, then we're good with the exhaust side. I'm still going to have to get some harnesses for the vehicle inside. Alright, so one more thing that I got that I haven't shown off yet is this piece of equipment. We got ourselves some drag slicks. So what we're going to run into with this is it's very difficult to find a true slick that will fit on cars with big wheels. Usually when you have a slick on a car, they've modified to a 15-inch wheel, but that's where I found this one that fits on an 18. But the big issue is it's 28 inches tall, which is pretty beefy compared to the stock, because stock is about 26. But as you can tell, we've got plenty of space up and down, probably plenty forward and back, but it's up here at this corner that's the big culprit. So you can see that's fitting pretty tight there. And since this is 2 inches bigger than the stock, that means we got an inch on either side. So that's pretty much gonna look a little bit like this. Let's move this over so you can see the corner. You can essentially see that there's not that much room there. So what we're going to end up having to do, I'm probably going to have to trim the rear bumper, that rear bumper cover, trim it back a little bit. We've got this up here. We've got about almost 2 inches that we can trim off to make this kind of curve out a little more. That will actually help out quite a bit, and we'll just carve it off and see what we can do. Especially when you jack up the car, this wheel likes to come further forward. Not too sure why they curved it all the way back, but coming here we can just straighten it up and it should all fit on there pretty decent. It'll be like a just barely fit, but that will kind of make it so we don't have to worry about, lowering the car. So maybe we'll just fill her out. But anyways, that's the new little hurdle that I've got to create. But I don't know about anyone else. That looks pretty neat. And it's basically, they do make like drag radials that are more in line with this, but I kind of wanted the bias ply slick just for that little bit of forgiveness on the drive lane, because manuals aren't necessarily known for being nice on the drive line, and I have no idea what the weak link is in this car. So, all right, onward to the next part. So essentially in here you can see the gas pedal right about there. We got that piped in there. We're still going to have to build a platform down on the floor because there's a lot of space between the floor and the pedals. So we'll have to make a platform to make sure that our feet don't slide off the pedals. Of course, we got our little skeleton guy over here for our shifter. We've got at least minimum level of gauges that we need: speed, tachometer, and fuel. And then the terminator should be able to dial in the rest of the numbers so we can have coolant temperature and oil pressure displayed on there. So we'll just need the harness and to bolt in the chair and probably get another chair so we can actually have a passenger. Then a firewall still needs to be built on the passenger side once I get the exhaust and wastegate figured out. And then we're going to have to start assigning switches. We've already got the furthest dash switch is the reverse lockout for the transmission. Then the next one in, I believe, is... What did I do with it? I think that's the fan switch. So what I did is I put the power through the switch there, and then the terminator box does the ground for this solenoid. So that way I can flip that switch and kill all power to the fan if I'm working on something on the car and it wants to have the fan on. We don't want to chop our fingers off, so we'll have essentially a kill switch there. So that's those two. Next one in, probably, oh, maybe we'll still have one for the fuel pump, because the way I'm doing it, I'm doing a staged fuel pump system. So the first pump will run off the Holly, and then the second pump will be flipping a switch on the dash, which will also act as the scramble button. Because essentially what I'm going to do is keep it on about 5 psi, whatever a wastegate spring is, and that will be enough to be fed by just that one pump. So as you're just cruising around, we just have the one pump dealing with that. And then we'll hit a switch, it'll engage the scramble, push it up to 14, 15 psi or so, and kick on that secondary pump. Then we'll need one of the switches for the windshield wiper high-low. So I'm essentially this stock, I haven't figured out what all the switch locations is. I think some of them are resistance, some of it, either way, when you flip the wipers onto full speed, it actually turns wipers on. So I'm just going to rig up a 2-pole solenoid. So flip of the switch, you have high, flip it off, you have low, and then you can turn it on and off with a stock. Then let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them taken care of. Then a couple of them, one of them is probably going to be kill switch for the little air compressor that we're going to rig up in there. And then that leaves a remaining 3 open. 2 of them, one will become fan and pump for like a differential cooler, and a fan and pump for a transmission cooler. Those we're not going to tackle right away because we're only going to need them for long distance runs. So we're not going to be hitting anything like that in this first getaway. And then we'll just have another switch just to be there. So that's at least the plan there. We might rig that switch into something else as well, but that's at least what I'm aiming at. So let's just go take a quick look at the board of doom that tells us what type of crap we have left to do. Alright, so here's our board of doom. You may have remembered us making this way back in the day, but as you can tell, I started crossing off a whole bunch of this stuff. So after crossing off a whole bunch of them, I decided to put a star next to the ones that need to be completed before we try to hit Rocky Mountain Race Week. So that's of course 5-point harness, putting the boost control solenoid in, re-rigging up our steering stabilizer, because that was something that I had to remove to make room for the oil pan, and then finish the exhaust pipe. Then we need to do our brakes, probably some sort of door card, windshield surrounds, power door locks, and of course Probably need to starter this up here as well. We need some real axles in there. So, of course, we'll probably have to have a windshield in there, possibly some paint, but if we got a driver in primer, that's what we're going to do. I could always find a bucket of that horrible color match and just spray a little bit on to make it somewhat one color, but that's for something else. So essentially everything that we've gotten off of here, I suppose we need to start this other transmission tunnel piece. So we've done the exhaust manifolds, we've done the turbo, blow off, wastegate, intercooler, belt tensioner, intercooler pipe, steering lines, steering cooler, drive shaft, the whole fuel system, the ECU, clutch, flywheel, throwout, radiator. We've modified the bumper. We've got an oil cooler in there. We did the main wiring harness, battery relocation, throttle body, spark plugs and wires, camshaft springs, and the trunnion upgrade. We did some dash gauges. I still want a tire pressure gauge. So we're just gonna do one of those really cheap screw-on valve cover type of things, just so we don't not cruising down the highway and get some real messed up numbers. And we've done the Mustang rear end. We just got wheels and tires. We did our cage. We put the shifter extension where we put the skull guy on. We did sway bars. This we didn't end up doing because it wasn't going to work, and was just an experiment. That we're not doing. Oil pan baffles, we did that, and then we put the battery cutoff switch, and of course we put the engine and transmission in. So I need to mark one more thing down. We need Titan motor mounts. I just remembered that the motor mounts still don't have a nut on the bottom of them. So just in case I needed to slide it one way or another to reposition something, I had the ability to. So I need to figure out where I put the nuts for them, hog them down, and then we should be pretty much good to go. So since it's now just beginning of March, the plan is hopefully next week or two we will be confident enough to fire this thing up. I didn't want to start it without having working clutch and brakes. I figured that was probably a bad idea if somehow we ended up being in gear, hit the key and it fires and tries to take off through the garage door. I need some sort of brakes. So that's why I haven't tried firing it up last month, because we need to get those wheels and tires in before we can switch out the brakes and so on and so forth. So once we get it fired in March, we'll have April to send out the axles, get them built up. Hopefully it's only going to take a couple weeks, but I'm going to schedule in a month for that. So that's going to be all of April. Then May is going to be a solid month of hopefully driving it. So that way I can see if there's any weird little leaks or issues that I need to cure before going on a long distance trip. And then start of June, finishing up the trailer and making sure we have lights and everything, and then we'll be rolling at the end of June. So we definitely have enough time to accomplish everything. I've got probably about a month less than I wanted to. I wanted to be at this point at the beginning of February, but things are what they are, and you can't control how life turns out sometimes. So, that is the status of the project, and we are sitting pretty good. So I'm going to keep busting some things out, making videos along as we go. We'll probably have less videos than I have in the past because it takes a long time to set up the camera, talk to everyone, do a couple things, record it all, wherein I can just keep busting out little things as I get around to it, because you can't really make a decent video on putting one fitting here, a sensor over here, extending a wire harness over here, and sitting on your butt for another half hour. So, anyways, I guess we're just going to leave it off here. Thanks again for stopping by and keeping up with this project, and hopefully I get to see a whole bunch more of you guys at a later time. So, we will see you all around.